Nous aurons une discussion ce soir, elle est importante, parce que d'abord, je pense qu'il faut envoyer un signal fort dans cette période à l'Ukraine et aux Ukrainiens. Dans le même temps, il faut que nous soyons vigilants. Est-ce qu'on peut aujourd'hui ouvrir une procédure d'adhésion avec un pays en guerre? Je ne le crois pas. Est-ce qu'on doit fermer la porte et dire jamais? Ce serait injuste. Est-ce qu'on peut oublier les équilibres de la région? Il faut faire attention.
And just before the summit began, Macron and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz had spoken to President Vladimir Putin in a joint phone call, demanding for an immediate ceasefire. The demands were, of course, denied, and Macron admitted that he does not see a diplomatic solution to the war in the coming few days. The leaders also discussed sanctions. The question, of course, is, do they impose more sanctions on Russia? Latvia's Prime Minister seemed pretty keen on doing so, saying that Ukraine was fighting their fight, and Europe needs to go further in hurting Russia financially. The Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo described the situation as Europe's 9/11. Russia's invasion, remember, has shattered the European security order that had emerged after the Second World War and the collapse of the Soviet Union back in 1991.
Multiple bloody crimes against civilians, including Russia.
Now, Europe fears that their standoff with Russia will only worsen in the coming years, and leaders have sought to agree on how quickly they can, of course, reduce imports of Russian energy to shore up their defense capabilities. Now, inflation is another big issue that the EU is, of course, dealing with as a fallout of this war. The rise in food prices, Europe's future has been deeply entwined with this war in Ukraine, which so far has resulted in 2 million refugees, Ukrainian refugees, pouring into Europe. Now, the situation in Ukraine is worsening by the day. The 15th day of the Russian invasion witnessed more bloodshed and destruction as the unrelenting assault has forced more citizens to flee. The fear of Russian tanks encircling Kiev are mounting as the troops are just miles away from the eastern limits of the city. The Russian Ministry of Defense has released a video that shows its airborne units in Ukraine. According to the latest, the Russian forces have rolled their armored vehicles up to the northeastern edge of Kiev, edging closer in their attempt to encircle the Ukrainian capital. But the residents of Kiev are putting up pretty brave resistance against the Russian assault.
No, we're not afraid. I know we are being defended. We are not afraid. I'm not afraid to die. I feel sorry for my children and my grandchildren. I'm not afraid of anything, you understand? I'm not afraid of anything. I'm afraid only for my children and grandchildren.
Now, on the other side of the Ukraine, the Defense Intelligence Department has released a video that shows a Russian battalion suffering some significant losses during a fight in the Brovary district of Kiev region. One of the tanks left behind by the Russian forces was reportedly confiscated, repaired and then taken to use in the field by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainian soldiers showed a damaged armored personnel carrier to the press crews. They also showed the items taken out of the vehicle, including a Russian soldier. Meanwhile, a number of residents have gathered under a broken bridge blown up by the Ukrainian forces recently. People from Kiev, including children and elderly, were seen crossing the very arduous river Irpin during the temporary ceasefire. Now, there are many videos that have emerged that show the residents carrying small children, rucksacks and pets fleeing to the nearest evacuation points in the hunt for safety from the relentless Russian airstrikes in the conflict zones. The mayor of Kiev has said that over half of the city's population has already left from the city. Meanwhile, our correspondent Anas Malik is currently in the heart of action. He is in the capital city of Kiev. This, of course, is the front line of the conflict. He sent us this report with the latest in terms of Russia's ongoing assault on the Ukrainian capital. Listen in.
Vehicles, and they claim to have destroyed a number of tanks. Now, in the video, in the media meetup that the reveal that we saw, this target was just done northeast of the capital of Kiev, or the capital of Ukraine, the city of Kiev, in a city called Brovary. This is just about 25 kilometers, and this city goes onwards towards Chernihiv and to the Belarusian border. There was a huge convoy and column that was expected to enter from that side towards Kiev, but the Ukrainian military says that it has repented that attack and that they have destroyed a number of Russian tanks. This has been claimed by the Ukrainian military. Anas Malik in Kiev, Ukraine, for Beyond World is One.
We own reports from Ground Zero.
They're being evacuated.
We get you all the voices from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv.
Probably you can hear that's shelling being done right now.
Exclusive report from the heart of the conflict. How long can Kyiv resist the Russian assault?
I'm standing in Bucha on the bridge that has been blown up to dismantle or disconnect the Russian side to.
WION gets you the complete picture with Anas Malik live in Kyiv.
Almost about 2.2 million refugees have in fact fled from Ukraine so far. That's almost about 5% of its total population. This is now emerging as Europe's biggest refugee crisis since the end of the Second World War. Now, the question, of course, is who are all leaving the country? Now, most of those who are heading abroad are women, children, and the elderly. Now, Ukrainian rules have now barred men, all able-bodied men in the age group of 18 to 60 from leaving the country. This is because they could be conscripted in the coming days. So where are all of these Ukrainians heading? Now, currently, there are no flights out of the country, so refugees are reaching neighboring nations by car, bus, train, or on foot. Now, most of them have gone to Belarus, Poland, Russia, Moldova, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, and France, amongst other EU nations. The United Nations has said that at least about 4 million people could flee from Ukraine if the war were to continue for the next few days. Authorities in the United Nations expect the flow to intensify as the Russian army advances deeper into Ukraine. Now, more than half of those who have fled Ukraine are now said to be in Poland.
In any war, the psychological trauma for children is huge. So what's critical is providing safe spaces for children and for parents to come and play, and to unpack what they've dealt with, to speak with counsellors about their experiences, and also to get the specialised care from experts to help them start to deal with the trauma from their experiences.
So the next question, of course, is will these refugees stay in the neighbouring nations? Now, under the existing rules, Ukrainians with passports and biometric data have been allowed to enter the EU. They can enter the bloc without a visa. They can also stay for almost up to 3 months. It also includes temporary relaxed border controls. It will allow people to enter even if they do not have a valid passport or a visa. It also allows crossings at temporary border points and easy access to humanitarian services. The guidelines further add that those bringing pets will also be allowed. And lastly, how easy will it be for the Ukrainians to move beyond the European Union? Now, this could, of course, prove to be very complicated. Britain established 2 visa schemes for Ukrainians seeking sanctuary. But this has been under question. Now, as of Wednesday, only about 700 visas have been issued. The authorities will now simplify the visa process from next week, with the visa application process now set to be virtual. Now, as for the United States, it will offer temporary protected status to the Ukrainians who are already inside of the country. This comes as the United States has said that it is prepared to accept more refugees. Now, interestingly, the tiny nation of Israel has so far already taken in as many as about 5,000 Ukrainians and could allow another 20,000 others who arrived before the invasion to remain temporarily in the country. Meanwhile, North Korea has said that it is planning to launch a number of reconnaissance satellites in the coming years, and according to the state media, North Korea will of course condition the satellites to provide real-time information on military actions by the United States and its allies. Our next report gets you the details.
North Korea says it will launch satellites to monitor the U.S. and its allies in the years ahead, according to state media on Thursday. Leader Kim Jong-un said a lot of military reconnaissance satellites would be put into orbit as part of a 5-year plan announced in 2021. State media KCNA reported that Kim inspected the country's space agency this week and that Kim noted, quote, "The purpose of developing and operating the military reconnaissance satellite is to provide the armed forces of the DPRK with real-time information on military actions against it by the aggression troops of the U.S. imperialism and its forces in South Korea, Japan, and the Pacific." The move may prove as controversial as the country's nuclear armed weapons tests because experts say the satellite uses the same ballistic missile technology banned by the UN Security Council. Pyongyang said it's conducted 2 satellite systems tests over the last 2 months. The launches drew international condemnation, and U.S. military responded by increasing its surveillance of the Yellow Sea and heightened its ballistic missile defense readiness. KCNA reported Kim defended the satellite work as protecting North Korea's sovereignty, exercising its right to self-defense and elevating national prestige.
All right, let's now get you some updates from Pakistan, where the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan's government seems to be using every trick in the book to try and target the opposition parties in the country. It is as if Imran Khan does not want the opposition to exist in the country. Now, in the latest, this is what has happened in Islamabad, where the police decided to conduct an operation inside the country's parliamentary lodges. Now, the police stormed inside the parliamentary lodges and arrested at least about 19 people. This includes several of the JUIF members of the National Assembly, and biometric data have been allowed to enter the EU. They can enter the bloc without a visa. They can also stay for almost up to 3 months. It also includes temporary relaxed border controls. It will allow people to enter even if they do not have a valid passport or a visa. It also allows crossings at temporary border points and easy access to humanitarian services. The guidelines further add that those bringing pets will also be allowed. And lastly, how easy will it be for the Ukrainians to move beyond the European Union? Now, this could, of course, prove to be very complicated. Britain established 2 visa schemes for Ukrainians seeking sanctuary. But this has been under question. Now, as of Wednesday, only about 700 visas have been issued. The authorities will now simplify the visa process from next week, with the visa application process now set to be virtual. Now, as for the United States, it will offer temporary protected status to the Ukrainians who are already inside of the country. This comes as the United States has said that it is prepared to accept more refugees. Now, interestingly, the tiny nation of Israel has so far already taken in as many as about 5,000 Ukrainians and could allow another 20,000 others who arrived before the invasion to remain temporarily in the country. Meanwhile, North Korea has said that it is planning to launch a number of reconnaissance satellites in the coming years, and according to the